There we go. Welcome to the Leaders Lab for the packet for March. The theme is vulnerability. And I have an announcement, which is the next one of these is March 8th. And that will be on April's theme of resistance, a little deep dive into all of the holidays that happened in April through the lens of resistance. So I have a quote about vulnerability. Because we have not always had the courage to be imperfect, we let go of who we ought to be and embrace who we are. Because we have been afraid of our own vulnerability, we let go of who we are and we let go of who we ought to be and embrace who we are. Mm-hmm. So there are 4 sessions for March. And the theme that I kept in my head all day is all month for writing this packet was the vulnerability of the little crocus coming through the snow in March. So for those of us who live in climates where that happens, that was my image. Life asks us to be vulnerable is the overwhelming umbrella statement. And then the first lens is life asks us to be vulnerable when we seek friendship. That means we want to develop the ability to say, I like you. The second one is life asks us to be vulnerable when we can't do it on our own. And the phrase that we want to work on is the ability to say, I need help. The third session, life asks us to be vulnerable when we hope. And that's the ability to say, I trust this will happen. Just like that little crocus. I trust that spring will come again. The fourth and last one is life asks us to be vulnerable when we show our true selves. And that is developing the ability to say, this is me. And there's some connection to the Trans Day of Visibility for that session as well. So let's go into them. The first session, session A, I wanted to point out that this is what I do with every single children's packet. We take the theme of vulnerability and I tease apart, well, what would that mean in terms of movement for children? And the movement that came up was the leap of faith. We take a leap of faith when we're asking to be vulnerable. And that then I translate to the Wonder Box for that first session of using a frog. So a stuffed animal, a puppet, a little figurine comes out of the Wonder Box. And you say, this little frog takes what we call a leap of faith every time it jumps out off of the log. Who knows where it's going to land? They jump hither and thither. And that's what we do too. When we want to make a friend, we sort of take this risk and we're vulnerable and who knows where we're going to land, but we hope we'll land in a good spot. And we say, oh, I like you. Would you be my friend? The book for the session is The Other Side by wonderful author Jacqueline Woodson, about a fence between a white family and a black family in what seems to be a southern town. And the little black girl wants to make friends with the little girl on the other side who's white. And her mother, the little black girl's mother, said, don't do that. That's not what we do. And the 2 girls make friends by climbing the fence together because their moms didn't say, don't climb the fence. They just said, don't play. And they climb the fence and they make friends with the other side. And it's lovely. And it's about being vulnerable. The second session of we can't do it on our own. Life asks us to be vulnerable when we can't do it on our own. And that's the ability to say, I need help. So in the brainstorm lab, we talked about anxious children and what we might do to help them understand a little bit about how anxiety and sadness can be helped when you ask for help. So we found the lovely three things to do in the Explore It section, which I've always loved to do with children. There's worry stones to make. There's worry dolls to make, those little Guatemalan dolls. And you can purchase them or you can make them out of pipe cleaners. We've got some links of an art teacher who made really nice pipe cleaner ones. And there's a worry box, which directly connects to the worry box story in the Wonder Box. So, or in the story time. Yeah. So there's a couple of things about dealing with worry and saying you need help. And of course, the worry dolls you put under your pillow, you tell all their worries to her, and you put it under her pillow, under your pillow, and they will give you good dreams. The other thing that just came up after I released the packet is the wonderful book, Rabbit Listened. This would be another alternate book. The book called The Worry Box was recommended by our Widening the Circle team, and it's really good. However, also the one that came up in several chats was the Rabbit Listened story. If you need an alternative. The third session, life asks us to be vulnerable when we hope. This in the back of my mind was that little crocus and the fact that it's the spring equinox. We hope that spring will come. These cold, slushy days in March will keep happening, but we keep our hope going. And I used the poem by Unitarian Emily Dickinson about hope. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. I suggest in the Explore It section that you might want to do some memorization of that poem. That's an old technique that people, in the 1800s used to memorize everything. One of the things about memorization is that it comes to you when you need it. It's something that you can say. And my Catholic friends, one of whom is watching here, they could say the Hail Mary right away when they were under stress. What might our children turn to? Would it be go now in peace? Well, that's not really something that would help you in times of stress. What about hope is the thing with feathers? It's just an idea, because memorization is something you learn by heart to put it in your heart. The other couple of things I wanted to point out about session C is the beautiful song by Reverend Meg Barnhouse. She sings All Will Be Well. It's a song she wrote based on Julian of Norwich's words. And she sang it to us in person at several Loretta conferences, and it just sticks with me. And it's just a beautiful way to offer a meditative, mindful time with children as well. There's a skit suggested. The Brave Little Parrot is one of the two books for this session. And in day camp, after we read that book, we gave the children an opportunity to make a skit. This is the brave little parrot who takes drops of water to try to put out a forest fire by himself. And all the other animals say, just leave it, don't try, don't hope. And finally, one of the big gods in Buddhism takes pity on it, the little parrot, and grants a thunderstorm. Well, the children just went to town and wanted to act that out. there was something about the deep hopefulness in that story. And they created some beautiful, beautiful skits that day. So I just wanted to mention that it's not a spurious suggestion. It's something I've seen done successfully. And then there's the origami crane or dove. The origami crane is the symbol of hope. There's a story that goes with that, the Sadako and the 1,000 Cranes, about a little girl who got leukemia after the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. So my advice is the cranes are beautiful, but most elementary school children find it very hard to do. And that's why I included some doves, just cut out dove images, which is also a sign of hope. If you're lucky enough to have maybe a 6th grader, maybe a 12th grader who knows how to make those, I had the experience of those people coming in, and the kids loved having those big kids come in and teach them so much that they tried patiently to make them. But I'd give you a warning about origami. It's harder than it looks. Yeah, okay. And the last one is this session D. This is me. When life asks us to be vulnerable, when we need to say, this is me, even though it might be hard. The Trans-Day connection is the book by Kyle Lukoff called When Aiden Became a Brother. This was a little boy who didn't understand why, even though Aiden was born a girl, why it felt like just belonged in a different gender. And now this little boy, Aiden, is looking at the birth of a sibling and getting a little nervous about how do I let this new sibling become who they need to be. When Aiden became a brother. The fun little connection about this is that one of our DREs connected us to Kyle Lukoff, the author, and really wanted us not to miss the opportunity to use this book. So there's a whole description of the author's own journey that I suggest in the Explorer section, which I think is a valuable thing to do. And then there's a site called genderwheel.com, from which I've put links to all kinds of really interesting coloring pages, 11 questions about gender, 10 tips for creating a more genderful world, that kind of resource that they were so kind to provide on the internet. And those things also would go in your soul work table if you do that at the back of the sanctuary. That's the last page of the packet where I take everything that might work as a soul work table in the back of the sanctuary and put it in there for you. The final thing I wanted to mention was just a lifting up when I put all those stories in the back of the packet. So we put the stories that are suggested in the each session. We put extra stories and extra picture books, which might come from the Widening the Circle people that I couldn't fit in. And we put in wisdom tales, and we use this book, Doorways to the Soul, to as a way to find even more wisdom tales. Elisa Davy Pearman was one of our experts when I was writing for Tapestry of Faith. She came in and did a wonderful stories workshop with us. What was it, 5 or 6 authors that were starting to write Tapestry of Faith way back when. And I just wanted to mention this because of copyright issues, I can't put the story in, but it's one of the books we recommend is in your library. Let's put that back there. And I just wanted to say hi to my dad there. He passed away in early January, and he made me that chalice after he took down a juniper bush in our backyard. So that's my little presence of my father there. So I think that's it. I have a closing quote. This is by Reverend Joni Johnson Lewis, It's just an excerpt from a beautiful quote. These were both in the worship packet, by the way, if you want to find them and use them. May we have the courage to open ourselves to the pleasures and wounds of life. May we have the strength to be open and honest with ourselves and others, even when it is difficult. May we have the wisdom to understand that when we travel through the mist of uncertainty, openness and vulnerability make it more possible to find the way through that mist. To be open and vulnerable is to be alive. Thank you for joining me. Thank you. Goodbye.